Equations. We're going to have a look at some equations, which is basically algebra that has an equal sign. So this means that both sides of the equation have to be equal at all times. When you are asked to do things with equations, no longer are you asked to simplify as you would be when you see algebra. You're being asked to solve now. So in these questions, you have to find the answer for the letter. When we are solving an equation, in order to do that, what we need to do is do the opposites to both sides. We basically need to undo the equation. We need to see how it's been formed in the first place and undo it by doing the opposites to both sides. The reason we do it to both sides is because we need to keep both sides equal. And we need to do it in the reverse order. So almost as if we hit the rewind on a DVD player or the rewind on a video and we watch it play back. It doesn't go in an opposite order, it goes in the reverse order. It doesn't go in some random order, it goes exactly in the reverse way that it was formed in the beginning. And what we need to end up with is we need to end up with getting the letter by itself. So let's have a look at the first couple of questions. The equations, these ones we're going to do, are just ones that will be 1 or 2 steps. So this means they will involve us doing 1 or 2 steps in reverse order in order to get the letter by itself. The first one we look at is y plus 7 equals 10. Starting with the letter, what has happened to the letter to create this equation? Well, we started with y and then we added 7. We don't need to worry about the equals because the equals is actually the answer. So it doesn't tell us anything about what happened to form this equation. So there's one step done in this equation, so there's one step we need to undo. The opposite of plussing 7 is minus 7, and what we need to do is make sure that we write it underneath and down the page. It's important that you make sure you line up your working out properly down the page and underneath each other. Okay, so lining up the equal signs, this plus 7 and minus 7, if I had 7 then I took 7 away, I end up with nothing. So that's cancelled out. I've now got just the letter by itself, and 10 take away 7 leaves me with 3. The 3 dots I've put out the front there are therefore, and they mean therefore I've finished the answer and I now have solved because I have found an answer for my letter. Have a look at this side. Again, I'm using the letter y, and let's have a look at what happened to y to form this equation. This is a 2-step equation, and that means that 2 steps were involved in forming the equation. So what happened to y first? Well, right in front of it is a 3, which means times by 3. So y got times by 3, and that was the first step. Then the second step that happened was we obviously got an answer for that, and then we took away 2. Remember again, the equals 10, we don't need to worry about that, that's just the answer. So the 2 steps that happened was we times by 3 and we minused 2. Now when we hit rewind, we need to go back in the reverse order. So the last thing we did was minus 2, so that means it's the first thing we're going to undo. The opposite of minus 2 is plus 2. What you do to one side, you must do to the other side to keep both sides equal. Line up your equal signs. 10 plus 2 gives me an answer of 12. Minus 2 plus 2 cancels each other out. I've still got one step to go, so that means I'm still left with 3y. That's one of my 2 steps done. The next step, what happened to y? Well, in the very beginning it got times by 3, and that's all that's been left with. The opposite of times by 3 is divide by 3. Line up your equal signs. 12 divided by 3 is 4. Divide by 3 and times by 3 will cancel each other out, and I'm left just with the answer. I've now solved, I found the answer for the letter, therefore out the front with your 3 dots, y equals 4. Coming up to this side, here I've used x, and this again is a 2-step equation, so that means there was 2 steps involved in forming this equation, and there'll be 2 steps involved in solving the equation. So let's have a look what happened to x first. Well, x got multiplied by 2 first to get 2x. Then we divided, remember divide by is the same as fraction line, divided by 7. Again, we don't have to worry about that. So times by 2, then divided by 7. The last thing we did, which will be the first thing we undo, is dividing by 7. So the opposite of divide by 7 is to times by 7. What you do to one side, you must do to the other side to keep it equal. Line up your equal signs. 4 times 7 is 28. The times 7 and the fraction line, which means divide by 7, cancels out, and I'm left with 2x. What's now happening to the x is it's being multiplied by 2. I need to undo it. It's the last of my second step. The opposite of timesing is dividing. What you do to one side, you must do to the other side. Okay, lining up your equal signs. 28 divided by 2 is 14. The times 2 and the divide 2 cancel out, and I'm left with, therefore, x equals 14. Next one, again this is a two-step equation. What happened to x first is it was minused from 9. Then we divided the whole thing by 8. So the last thing we did was dividing the whole thing by 8. So the first thing we're going to do is get rid of that divide by 8. How we do that is by doing opposites. The opposite of divide by or fraction line is times. So timesing by 8, timesing by 8. Lining up your equal signs. 6 times 8 is 48. That divide by or fraction line and times by 8 cancels out, and I have x take away 9. Now I have one step left to do. Minus 9 is what's happening to the x. The opposite of minus is to plus. What you do to one side, you've got to do to the other side to keep them equal. Line up your equal signs. 48 plus 9 is 57. The minus 9 and the plus 9 cancels out, and I end up with, therefore, x equals 57. One last quick one to do, number 5. If I have k over 7 plus 3 equals 5. Again, this is a two-stepper. What happened to k first? It was divided by 7. What happened next? It was plus 3. What was the last thing we did? We added 3. So that's the first thing we've got to undo, going back in reverse order. So minusing 3 from both sides, line up your equal signs. 5 take away 3 is 2. Plus 3 minus 3 cancels each other out. I'm left with k over, or k divided by 7 is what fraction line means. The opposite of dividing by, I've only got one step to do now, is to times. What you do to one side, you must do to the other side. Lining up your equal signs. 2 times 7 equals 14. The times and the divide, which is the fraction line, cancel out, and I'm left with, therefore, k equals 14. You can now work on exercise 8.1. It's on page 333. I'm going to ask you to do question 1, 2 and 3, only the first column, please. So if the questions are down in columns, it might be A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I. I only want you to do the first column of each question, please. We're going to have a look at some more complex equations now. So remembering, we're going to do exactly the same thing we did when we solved some basic 1 and 2 step equations. We're going to start with the letter, and we're going to work out each thing as it happened to the letter and the equation was formed, and then we work out what the last thing was that we've done, and then we undo it. And then we're going to recheck the question again, keep each time working out what the last thing was that we did, undo it by doing opposite operations to both sides, and then making sure we keep checking until the last thing we did. Remember that when we are solving, we need to find the answer for the letter. So we keep going step by step until we have the letter by itself. We need to go down the page with logical working out, lining up our equal sign. So let's have a look at the first one here. 3y over 4 plus 5. Remember, we don't need to worry about the equals. We just need to look at the number of steps. Now, this is actually going to be a 3-step equation. It took 3 steps to form it, 3 steps to solve. You don't need to know that, but I'm just telling you that for the moment. So starting with the y, what happened to the y first? It got times by 3. What happened to that term next? Was we divided by 4. That's what fraction line means. What happened after that? We added 5 on the end. The last thing we did was adding 5. So the first thing we're going to undo is that add 5. The opposite of add 5 is, minus 5. What you do to one side, you must do to the other side. Line up your equal signs. 11 take away 5 leaves me with 6. Plus 5 minus 5 cancels out, and I'm left with 3y over 4. Let's go back to the letter again. Remember to start at the letter and keep working our way down. What happened to y? It got times by 3. What happened next? It got divided by 4. So the last thing we did was divide by 4. The opposite of divide by 4 is times by 4. What you do to one side, you've got to do to the other. Line up your equal signs down the page underneath. 6 times 4 is 24. The divide by 4, which is the fraction line, and the times by 4 cancel out, and I'm left with 3y. What happened to y? It got multiplied by 3. Last step now is to get rid of that timesing by 3. The opposite of timesing is divide. What you do to one side, you must do to the other side. Line up your equal signs down the page, nice logical working out. 24 divided by 3 is 8. The times 3 and the divide by 3 cancel each other out, and I'm left just with the y. Therefore, y equals 8. Let's jump down to this one first, and then we'll get back to that writing in a minute. 2k minus 4 all over 3. So what happened to the k first? It times by the 2. What happened next? We divided by the 4. What happened last? Everything got divided by 3. How do I know that was the last thing that we did? Because it's all over 3, not just the 2k, the whole lot. So the last thing we did was dividing by 3. The opposite of dividing by 3 is timesing by 3. What you do to one side, you must do to the other. Okay, 16 times 3 is going to give me 48. The times 3, the divide 3, the fraction line, cancels each other out, and I have 2k minus 4. What happened to the k? It got times by 2. What happened next? We minused 4. Opposite of minus 4, plus 4. What you do to one side, you must do to the other side. 48 plus 4 is 52. The minus 4, the plus 4 cancel, and I'm left with 2k. What happened to the k? It was times by 2. That's the only step. The opposite of timesing 2 is dividing by 2. 52 divided by 2, k equals 26. Put my therefore out the front with my 3 dots, and I'm finished. Coming up to question 3. 5m over 2 plus 7. Again, remember, we don't need to worry about the answer just yet. What happened to m first? It got times by 5. Then it was divided by 2. And then lastly, the plus 7. See how this is different to this one down here? The minus 4 in this case is all over that 3. But here, just the 5m is over the 2. So in this case, the adding 7 is the last thing we did. But down here, the last thing we did was dividing by 3. So up here, m got times by 5. We divided by 2. Then the last thing we did was plus 7. In order to undo that last thing, opposite of plus 7 is minus 7. What you do to one side, you must do to the other, lining up your equal signs. 22 minus 7. I don't really need to use my calculator, but I'm showing you that you can be using yours if you need to. 22 minus 7 leaves me with 15. Plus 7 and minus 7 cancel out. What have I got left over this side that I haven't done anything to yet? 5m over 2. M got multiplied by 5, and then we divided by 2. The last thing we did was divide by 2. The opposite of dividing by 2 is to multiply by 2. Line up your equal signs. 15 times 2 is 30. The divide and the multiply cancels, and I'm left with 5m. M is not by itself now. I've still got one more step. M got multiplied by 5. The opposite of multiplying by 5 is dividing by 5. Line up your equal signs. 30 divided by 5 is 6. The times and the divide cancel out, and I'm left with m equals 6. On the last one, if we have brackets, we need to make sure that we expand these first. Remember your order of operations, your bod maths, tells us that we always must do brackets very first thing. So here I've got some brackets. Remember, brackets means times, so I'm going to expand my brackets. So 3 times y gives me 3y. 3 times minus 2 gives me minus 6. It's still all over 5, nothing happened or changed there, and it still equals 1. The only thing I've done is expand the brackets that's on the top there. Now let's have a look at how we formed the equation and keep working our way so that we undo the last thing each time. Y got multiplied by 3, then we minus 6. Then we divided the whole lot by 5. So the last thing we did was divide by 5. The opposite is to times by 5. What you do to one side, you must do to the other. 1 times 5 is 5. They cancel out. 3y minus 6. Y got times by 3. Then we minus 6. The last thing was minus 6. The opposite is plus 6. What you do to one side, you've got to do to the other. Line up your equal signs. 5 plus 6 equals 11. Plus 6 minus 6 cancels out. 3y. Last step, y is times by 3. Opposite is to divide by 3. Lining up your equal signs. 11 divided by 3. Press the SD button, and again, Shift SD button, and I'm going to get 3 and 2/3. You could have left it as 11 over 3, that's correct as well. And cancelling out my divide and my times leaves me with, therefore, y equals 3 and 2/3. Okay, can you now work on exercise 8.2, question 1, 2 and 5, and only the first column out of those 3 questions, please.